Greetings, Nerf herders, and a very belated May the 4th be with you. We intended to release this a lot sooner, but we'll get into those reasons later. But for now, welcome to our newest show as part of our Star Wars Plus playlist that we will eventually make. We've already kind of started this with The Mandalorian, and now we're adding our second Star Wars series to it, The Bad Batch, or as our new series will be called...
I have a Bad Batch feeling about this.
Yeah, we wanted to wait till the second episode to actually talk about this. And this is going to be a different format than our other videos. It's closer to what we did for Mandalorian in that we're going to discuss the episode as opposed to live reacting to it. Just because we felt that there was a better format for this type of series.
Also, we've only seen the first season and a little bit of the second season of Clone Wars. I at least have seen Rebels, and I've seen the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars in its entirety, so I have that frame of reference. In this case, we're kind of going into it a little ignorant of things, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to start this off with a big disclaimer right about now, because I really don't want to piss off any Star Wars fans. For those of you who haven't watched our Mandalorian videos and thus don't know our history in regards to Star Wars, we are not diehard fans.
We're fans. We're not. Yeah.
We know a good bunch. We've obviously seen all the movies.
Good bunch.
And as Doug said, we are in the process of watching Clone Wars. He's watched Rebels. I've seen a handful of episodes of Rebels, and we've obviously watched Mandalorian. Aside from that, other stuff we know about Star Wars is kind of sprinkled in between, in regards to the games, comics, and so on and so forth. Just so you know, we're not all-knowing experts. And that, I feel I have to make especially clear for this series. Because I know that this series pretty much comes off the heels of Clone Wars.
In fact, it's right off the heels of Episode 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that the Bad Batch had been established in that series. We haven't gotten that far yet. We debated whether we should have watched that first before starting this. But... given that we kind of dove into The Mandalorian without, having fully watched Clone Wars or Rebels, we figured, let's just try this and see if it maybe stands on its own without all of the copious amount of backstory. So we decided to take that risk, and at first I was a bit scared because given how this was starting off just like Clone Wars, I'm like, oh crap, they're going to go into all this side stuff that we have no clue about. But surprisingly, by the second episode, I could follow it easily enough without having to know every single person and planet and so on and so forth.
I at know, in terms of Clone Wars, I'm familiar with Saw Gerrera, so at least I knew when they introduced him. I'm like, okay, I know who he is. And I'm going off of, I guess we'll kind of talk about this, as we kind of talk about the synopsis, but I think there's another character that appeared that may be connected to Rebels, so we'll discuss that as we go along.
Yeah, so just wanted to make that clear off, so if we make any mistakes, our bad. We're learning. We're going to be learning as this series goes on, because obviously we want to know the backstory of certain things, and I feel like for certain future episodes it's probably going to be needed, so don't worry, we're getting to it. So patience, please. Right now we're just discussing the first 2 episodes as is with the knowledge we have now. So we'll start off with the first really long pilot, Aftermath, which pretty much starts as soon as Order 66 happens. You see them on a mission, the mission goes well, then Palpatine shows up and tells the clones to pretty much kill everybody. And for whatever reason, the Bad Batch is immune from this. We, of course, later find out it's because they're technically genetic defectives, so their, mind-controlled chips don't work that well. And hence why they actually still have a conscience in regards to, hey, why is everybody killing these Jedi? I thought they were our friends. Pretty much the whole episode takes place on Kamino, and all the changes that goes on once Palpatine declares himself Emperor. And we know that the clones, we know eventually that the clones aren't going to be used as much, especially once the later movies come along. They instead opt toward kidnapping and brainwashing children. So
in fact, I remember in the original Star Wars Battlefront 2 game from like the one that came out around the time that Episode 3 came out, the campaign is basically that of the story of the 501st. And in it, they actually mention how at one point, I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but I remember, because I think they stop using the clones and start opting, for different ways with the Stormtroopers. They do something on Kamino, and the 501st has to come in, and meanwhile, I think the Kaminoans are actually trying to delete all of the clones that are, still being made. And basically it's like your job to try and stop them. But, yeah, I mean, that's as much as I remember in this particular time. I mean, I will say this is definitely something that I very much wanted to see in a Star Wars series.
Yeah, we usually don't get a focus, directly after Order 66. Yeah, even Rebels, took place a good number of years after the fact.
Yeah,
right?
I think it was 15 years after Order 66, after the formation of the Empire.
Because I know that there's definitely been other events that took place during it, because I saw, on YouTube, this whole collage of, different mediums of what happened once Order 66 happened and how it affected each character and where they were and everything. So I know there was other stuff going on, but this is the first time we've actually seen it, right from the get-go and not from a main character's point of view. And they're clones at that, so that especially is interesting because it's they're technically part of the conflict, but they're not. It's not like they have an intricate knowledge of everything that's happening, and they, ask enough questions where it makes it easy for, the audience to, get the information they need, and the characters don't automatically know it.
This is honestly why I'm more excited for this. It's I loved Rebels, and I feel like I'm really gonna like Bad Batch. The problem I have with Clone Wars is it's rehashing everything. It's first off, we already had a Clone Wars series, as I said, with Genndy Tartakovsky doing it. So I was satisfied with that. I was very, very iffy about them doing, that full CGI series. Especially given that it was following, the main cast. Whereas with this, with Bad Batch and with Rebels, you've got completely different characters.
The cast of thousands.
Yeah, you've got
someone you never see again.
Yeah, it's very much world building. I mean, I know that's what Clone Wars was doing too, but I feel it's nice to see other characters in the universe, in the galaxy, who are affected during this honestly long period of time where there's so much that you have to work with, so much I want to know, this whole transition from the Republic to the Empire and how it affects everybody. Usually it's at best right now we've jumped a few years into the Empire, so we see a lot of people in it already adapted to that, way of life, whereas this is it's nice to see everything kind of scattered, everybody trying to figure out what their place is, and how it's going to affect them.
I hate to say it, it's basically the whole, Nazi invasion of World War II, where countries get invaded, people get uprooted, refugees are trying to escape. It really has that whole feel about it, which is appropriate, especially with the whole, because I didn't realize this at the time when they addressed it in Mandalorian, but with this, it became more obvious. The fact that they were giving people, was it link codes?
Yeah, chain codes.
Yeah, chain codes.
Yeah.
they were marking people to keep track of them, sort of like, you know, what the Nazis did with the Jewish people. Like, I know the whole thing of Star Wars is kind of a big allegory to World War II, but like that made it way more blatant. And it is actually a bit disturbing. Even when they first like introduced it in the second episode, it just once I realized that, I'm like, oh. And now I'm kind of scared where they go from here with that, because like I almost hope they don't go like the whole camp thing, because that would be a bit much.
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if there are, you know, concentration camps or just outright executions.
Yeah. I mean, Palpatine is a racist, so...
No, he would want to make sure that the old regime is just done away with. Hell...
I mean, he already did with the Jedi, technically, so...
Yeah, but I mean, it's even like, you know, they talk about it right in Episode 4, New Hope. It's like, we finally done away with the last remnants of the old Republic. So, yeah, honestly... It would not surprise me. Besides the Jedi, you know, anything else reminiscent of the Republic just gets done away with, or anybody who's, you know, not willing to adapt.
That is the Empire way. Yeah, and going back to the whole thing with Clone Wars real fast, because, again, as we mentioned, we're in the process of watching this, and the reason why it's taking us so long is because, at least from my perspective, I know you probably share my opinion, but I don't want to speak on your behalf, but from my personal opinion, I really don't feel Clone Wars all that much. I honestly think it's kind of pointless in the grand scheme of things. Like, I know the whole job of it is to, you know, basically do world building, to fill in maybe a few gaps here and there, to, you know, establish certain alien races and weaponry and other stuff pertaining to the lore of Star Wars. And it's
that, and also finally, you know, give us that much needed character development between Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That was missing, yeah.
That's the problem, though. Like, on the one hand, it does show you, like, the adventures that Anakin and Obi-Wan went on to show that they actually were close and best friends, because Lord knows the movies did not do a good job of showing that. But the problem is that they don't really focus on them all that much. Like, they obviously do get the episodes where they're together, where they're apart, where Anakin's with his Padawan, or Obi-Wan's off with his girlfriend or whatever, but for the most part, like, Clone Wars, like, from episode to episode, jumps from, like, main character to main character, even to characters that really don't even appear that often, or if at, like, or maybe just once and that's it. And that's kind of like a big complaint I saw about the prequel series as a whole, is that there's really no main character. And it's weird because Anakin is supposed to be the main character. This is his story of how he became a Jedi and then fell to the dark side, yet they're always diverging from him and his story, and I think the big reason is because Anakin's really boring as a character. I hate to say it, because it's like, you know what's going to ultimately become of him. You obviously know that there are going to be, like, they're going to throw, like, hints of, oh yeah, look at his dark tendencies, look, foreshadowing to him becoming a Sith. It's like, yeah, we know this. What else is going on? Well, what else are you going to do to make me, like, actually become endeared to Anakin and feel even sadder when he turns to the dark side? Like, they don't really do that, at least not from what we've seen so far. And that's what kind of made me worried about Bad Batch, is when I saw that it seemed it was lifted directly from Clone Wars, I'm like, oh god, please. Like, please say this is more focused and has better main characters than the last one. And for the most part, so far, I think they've done a good job, because the focus is the 5 characters on Bad Batch, or I should say 6, technically, and they stay on them, and I hope it stays that way for the rest of the series, because that's how it should be.
Yep, and that's why the Rebels works, because you focus on the crew of the Ghost. That's it. It's like, yeah, you get these, you know, carryover characters from Clone Wars show up. You might see the occasional character from the movies appear, but for the most part, it stays on those characters.
Like, I don't mind them focusing on a group of characters, and they go on individual adventures as part of like a character building thing. That's perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. I don't like it when a series is jumping to these random side characters, like, oh, what are these troopers doing at this base, or what are these random Jedi doing on this far off planet, or what's going on with Jar Jar? What is he up to? Like, or what's R2 up to in his little adventure? It's like, don't get me wrong, they're cute little side stories, but that's not why I'm watching the show. Like, I want to know what's going on with the main crew, and half the time it seems like they don't even know what to do with them. So that's what really aggravates me about Clone Wars, and again, why I'm hesitant to really watch it, or like finish it, so just so we have context for a lot of this. But again, we are going to watch it. You know, that's, opinions aside, we do want to genuinely get context for the stuff we're going to say. I had to say, in regards to the Bad Batch, I know there are 5 clones, but they're 5 distinctive clones, despite all being voiced by the same person. And it's nice that within 2 episodes, I can automatically tell who is who. Like, I know they tried doing that in, like, Clone Wars at times, where they focused on groups of clones, and, you know, they try to give them the little distinctive looks or distinctive inflection of their voice, but for the most part, they are the same person. With this, it's like, yeah, you can automatically tell who's who. So what is it? We have Hunter, aka Solid Snake. We have Wrecker, aka Wreck-It Ralph.
He's the tank.
Yeah, I want to wreck it. We have Tech, aka Egon from Ghostbusters. We have Echo, aka Data from Star Trek. And we have Crosshairs, aka Dinobot. Sorry, he reminds me of Dinobot. I don't know why.
And then we also have a 6th.
Yeah, when we have Omega, aka the Grogu of the series. So there's our Bad Batch. Those are our main 6 we focus on. Good. Good. Leave it at that. No more. Okay, maybe a few side characters. So yeah, the first episode is, again, I know they already introduced him in the Clone Wars, but for our introduction in this episode, I thought it was pretty good. We got to see, like, what they're all about. We got to see they each had individual conscience and, you know, a sense of right and wrong, with the exception of Crosshairs, but they indicate that's not his fault. It's that chip of his.
He's the one with the only, like, somewhat functional one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that they use that to their advantage, but we'll get into that, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, one thing that I was curious about is because it's like you see them interact with the other clones, and the other clones kind of act very
elitist.
Yeah, they act so weird around, you know, their fellow clones. I get they're different and that they're the defective clones or botched clones, but it's kind of weird to see how sort of racist they are against their own kind.
It honestly felt like a high school, that the whole cafeteria scene, where it's like, you know, Omega sits down and they're like, why are you sitting with us? We're the nerd table. Why are you giving us the time of day? And then the others combine and it's like, oh, look, it's the Sad Batch. And I'm like, you are all technically the same person. I don't know if, like, they were programmed with, like, Palpatine's, like, sense of, like, superiority or whatever. Maybe that was it. But, yeah, like you said, it's kind of weird that they would dislike some of their own when they're, again, basically the same person, except in the Bad Batch case, they have enhanced abilities. I don't know if it's maybe jealousy or, you know, just because they're their own special group and they don't let anybody else in. I mean, either way, it made for an interesting food fight scene. Wrecker just fucking throws himself in. Like, I was surprised at Omega. She just, like, as soon as she meets them, she just fully integrates herself into their group, whether they like it or not. She even throws a tray at a guy just because he dissed them. I'm like, okay, that's one way to make friends.
And then I also wanted to address, we kind of skipped over it, but at the very beginning, you know, when Order 66 goes down, there was a Jedi and a Padawan. The Padawan being named Caleb, and he's voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. And then he, you know, winds up getting away, and I'm kind of wondering if that is supposed to be Kanan from Rebels.
I heard it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen online they've confirmed that it's definitely him.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was weird that they had, like, this young, like, prepubescent teenager, and he sounded like a full-grown man. I'm like, that is a really weird choice. But then, once you mention that, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I know you saw Rebels, so I don't know if they ever got into his backstory, like...
They talk about it a little bit. I don't think they ever necessarily mentioned what he did during Order 66, but they have, you know, he has discussed his backstory on occasion.
I heard they've, like, addressed it, I think, in the comics or something, but... I don't know. I mean, at least in this continuity now it's, like, established. Mm-hmm. Makes sense he would change his name. Yeah. One of the few smart people in this series that actually did so. Like, seriously, Obi-Wan, Ben was the best you could come up with? Yeah, and you name Luke Skywalker, like, Skywalker, even though you're trying to hide him from his dad? Yeah, that worked well. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he's not the only familiar face to come back in this.
We see Grand Moff Tarkin.
Who still looks old.
He's freaking old back then. They show him at the very end of episode 3 as the Death Star is being constructed, and I could have sworn he has, like, darker hair. So it's weird.
I don't fully remember, but it would have made more sense than just make him still an old man. Like, I know some people, like, when they reach a certain age, they tend to look that way for a while until a certain period, but you think, like, almost 20-year period.
I mean, at least it's better than CGI, you know, Peter Cushing face from Rogue One, but still.
Yeah.
It's like, I have to wonder. Like, he doesn't look quite so old, but it's like he still looks like he's at least middle-aged at this point.
And yeah, Tarkin kind of proves what I've been saying about the Empire, like, when we were talking about it in terms of Mandalorian and all that. I kept saying, like, why is this, like, Empire that somehow managed to run itself for the last 20 so years, like, how is it both so efficient but also inefficient? And he pretty much proved my point with him deciding to dismantle the whole clone army thing. Because his reasoning being was that they were spending all this money to make these clones only for them to just, you know, basically be disposable bodies. And on the one hand, I understand that because, you know, again, it is wasting money and resources. But on the other hand, they're the freaking Empire now. They're in charge of Coruscant. They're in charge of, like, I think they make, like, their own currency now or something. So I didn't think money would even be an issue at this point, you know, once Palpatine had basically declared himself ruler over all. But now they're like, oh yeah, we're going to get rid of the clones and we're going to establish a new army. And I'm like, oh, you mean where you kidnap and brainwash children, some of whom actually break free of said brainwashing?
I don't know if that's what the Empire does. That's what the First Order does. But I don't know, because he's talking about conscripting, you know, an army. So he might be drafting.
I know there are some who are, like, drafted, because I remember, like, reading in, like, a Star Wars encyclopedia, there are certain stormtroopers that, you know, willingly enroll themselves in the program, and then there are others that, you know, they definitely are not clones. I know that much for certain.
But, I mean, you look at the Empire and how much, you know, propaganda they have going, and it's like, join the Empire, and you've seen, like, children up and join. Like, actually, that's something that happened in Rebels, as I recall, is that, you know, there are training camps and that people, you know, even the kids do join up, yes. The point is, I think they're drafted. I don't think they're just abducted like they are, you know, like the First Order would do. Because I think the First Order is more ragtag than, you know, the established Empire.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yes.
But it's just weird, though, because the whole point of the clones was that they had access to these soldiers that were programmed to be, you know, blindly obedient no matter what. And I know we have the exception with the Bad Batch who are defects, but the rest of them, for the most part, you know, they are obedient. And the fact that they want to jeopardize all that, you know, for the sake of money, like, that just doesn't sit well with me.
I mean, I think it just all boils down to the thought process behind the Republic and the thought process with the Empire. Because probably with the Republic, they're more akin to, the Jedi. The Jedi probably wouldn't mind so much using clones, whereas, they probably would have a problem just drafting, people off. But then again, that's kind of what the Jedi are doing, so who even knows? Point is, I think there's some sort of an ethical thing between, the Republic and the Empire, where the Empire has virtually no ethics.
Right, well, obviously we knew they had no ethics. It bothered me, especially with Tarkin, because it's like, he was so adamant that, like, he was so anti-clone. Like, everyone knew that, said that he was totally anti-clone. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's one reason he wants to get rid of the clones, and then the whole money reason. But then he makes a big whole emphasis on, are these soldiers loyal? Will they follow orders? And I'm like, if that's one of your big things about your soldiers, then why are you getting rid of the soldiers who are literally programmed to be loyal? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me, because it's like, you spend all this money and resources to make this perfect soldier who will, obey you without question. Why would you throw all that away just to bring in people that, again, these are regular people and other alien species that could easily turn on you on a dime? In the right or wrong circumstances. That just doesn't make sense to me. And I know, like, they probably are using the whole nationalism thing, like, sort of like what the Nazis did, brainwashing their civilians into, like, joining for the sake of, like, serving their country without question. But the thing is, like, that, depending on the circumstances and the person, that doesn't always work. Again, going back to the whole, kidnap children thing, Finn technically was brainwashed from an early age, but once he got to his first battle, he immediately broke free of that. I mean, who's to say that hasn't happened with other Stormtroopers, even the ones who voluntarily signed up? To me, that is way more risk than, using clones. So, yeah, that whole thing, like I said, just bothered me that I wanted to address and get out of the way real quick.
I'm sure there's, like, books that explain it a lot better.
Yeah. I will say, I do like that each member had, like, their own, like, speciality. Like, they're all enhanced, but, like, they each have, like... They kind of each max out a stat that they're all proficient in. One's exceedingly strong, the other one's really smart, the other one has great accuracy, the other one, has great hair. I don't know. No, I know.
Leadership qualities.
I know Hunter's like supposed to be like the leader and have like extra sharp sensories and stuff, but I don't know. You compare them to the other three, and it's like, wait, what's your specialty again? All right. And what was it like? I know there's an episode of Clones that explains Echo, but he's supposed to be like a cyborg clone, right?
I think something happened where he was in a battle or something and got, blown up.
Right.
And so they had to, reconstruct him. So yeah, he's probably a cyborg.
Which is fine. He'll be the cyborg of the Teen Titans group that we have going on.
Booyah!
Yeah, and then of course there's Omega, and like, again, I'm really convinced she's like the Grogu of this series, because I already saw these memes of people like saying, oh, she must be protected at all costs.
I feel like she's supposed to, it's the creators trying to make a new Ahsoka, trying to, create another, fan favorite character. I'm not feeling her that much yet. We'll see where this goes.
I mean, I've already seen, like, several theories going around as to what her deal is, because they pretty much imply that, she is one of the defective clones. Although it's really weird, because if that's the case, she's, like, the only female clone. Not only is she, like, the only female, but she's, like, one of the youngest ones there. At least, we haven't seen any other younger clones yet, aside from, like, that growing fetus.
And also, like, she's helping out with the Kaminoans, so it's like...
Yeah, she's, like, helping them learning to heal and stuff. And I'm wondering, like, what is special about her that they take her out of the ranks and are, like, training her to be a healer and stuff?
I mean, I know this is jumping ahead to, the next episode, but the deserter mentions, that the Kaminoans don't, make clones without a purpose, so probably something, that she's intended for.
Like, I've heard some people say she's not even an actual clone of Jango, that she's a clone of someone else. Like, I saw someone say maybe she's a clone of Palpatine, which I hope to God isn't the case, because we don't need another link to Palpatine. Lord knows it didn't go over well in Rise of Skywalker. And I saw another person say that she might be a clone of a Jedi and that she actually has, Force sensitivity. Given how she somehow instinctively knew how to shoot a blaster, having never held one before, and she seems to sense certain things even before the Bad Batch does. Which I guess I can see, but then again, it kind of falls into the whole Grogu territory. It's like, suddenly you have a new child that has Force powers that needs to be protected at all costs. And they're already kind of heading in that direction, too, because, it's not just that she integrates herself into the group, but she gets, really attached to a hunter. Because, I love all the scenes people have been sharing of her sort of, imitating his, mannerisms. He's sitting down thinking, and she does, the same thing while looking at him. And I'm like, aw, that's cute. And it becomes, of course, even more prominent in the second episode where, she gets introduced to a family and he thinks that, she needs that, but she really wanted to stay with him. Introducing that whole father-daughter dynamic. So, yeah, I'm interested to see, what they do with her. I do hope that they give her something, even if it's, them teaching her how to use a blaster, or how to fight, or even if she does have Force powers, how to use them. I just hope she's just not, a MacGuffin to protect, because Lord knows we've been getting enough of that lately. And, I do want to see her, actually become, her own character. And, see how she grows from here. So, yeah, the first episode was basically just, establishing everything, and introducing, or in some people's cases, reintroducing to these characters, showing what happened after Order 66, showing that, the whole plan for dismantling the clone army, and basically giving a reason why the Bad Batch defect and are now on the run. And, of course, showing Crosshairs inevitably get, I guess, brainwashed into, betraying his team. Again, I am really glad that they showed that, it wasn't his fault in that regard. Because you can tell that, despite his distaste for their behavior, he is genuinely loyal to his team. It's the whole, the whole brain chip thing that is, making him follow protocol over, following them. It kind of leaves room for, they can save him at some point. Which I guess is going to be a big plot point in the future. I'm just wondering if by that point, if he would want to be saved.
He just seems so very into the soldier. Even before he gets, more brainwashed. It's even though, he doesn't have the, the same functioning chip as all the others, it's he wants to be so much like the other soldiers. He wants to be a good soldier. And he wants to imitate how all the other clones are acting.
Yeah, I think it's more he gets these special powers, but he doesn't want them. He'd rather just be another number, not be, ostracized or noticed or considered anything special other than...
I mean, not necessarily. He might be, wanting it in terms of his abilities.
I mean, he probably... obviously he'll probably want the glory of, being the good, loyal soldier and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe even rise a bit above that. But in terms of, fitting in with his more colorful compatriots, you can tell he's not quite there. He tolerates them at most.
He's only happy when he's fighting. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, the reason I compare him to Dinobot, because I have a feeling his whole arc is going to be very similar to that, because for those who don't know, Dinobot was a Transformer in the Beast Wars series who started off as a Predacon, defaulted to the Maximals, and he stays with them for a good long while. And even though he has, some of his more evil, selfish tendencies, over time, he, learns...
Well, he kind of questions, who's right, who's wrong in there.
Right.
And he even, has to question, did I make the right decision in defecting and, joining the other team?
I mean, ultimately he did it because he was in for, his own means. He had his own reasons for them going to Earth, and, once the Predacons didn't fit in with that, he left them, deciding the Maximals had the better chance of doing what he needed to accomplish. And it just so happened along the way, he happened to befriend everybody, sincerely, and grew to care about them as a group. And he even, dies for them. But unfortunately, he gets resurrected as a bad guy again, and he stays a bad guy up until he dies again. Yeah.
Nah, it's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah, I know. It's really complicated.
It's really much more complicated than that.
And it really shouldn't be.
I don't think we could be here all day discussing that, but...
But the point is, when you think about it, look at the two characters, they're very similar, except it's kind of
the reverse.
Where he starts off as a good guy, but then he becomes a bad guy, and now you're wondering from here, is he going to be rescued, and is he going to genuinely join up with them again, or stay with the Empire because that's more what he wants to do? And I mean, I'm not saying I was really endeared to him, because again, he's kind of the wet blanket of the group. He just wants to do his duty, and that's that. But at the same time, you do feel that element of pity for him, and that this isn't by his own choice. I think the second episode I liked a little better, because it shows them, actively on the run. It shows Omega, being on a different planet for the first time ever. Actually seeing what dirt is.
Actually interacting with characters who aren't Kaminoans or clones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kids her own age.
Yeah.
I thought that was cute, that whole little hidden family. I was wondering, though, because I don't think we've seen that a clone actually, had a family. Was able to have kids.
I mean, we've seen clones defect or just up and do their own thing in the end, but
I don't think we ever saw one actually.
We've seen one with a family.
Yeah, so this is the first, and it's interesting.
Not to mention, it's also a interspecies one too. Yeah.
That really surprised me because I kept thinking, wait, can clones reproduce naturally?
More, I'm wondering how again interspecies.
Yeah.
But
because the kids looked mostly like his wife.
Yeah,
maybe you saw a little bit in their faces, but not much. But I thought it was really sweet, and you could tell he was a good dad too. Mm-hmm. The fact that he was able to comfort Omega after she nearly got killed.
Yeah, he's surprisingly more human than a lot of the other clones. Knew exactly how to handle the situation. Knew exactly how to talk to Omega.
Mm-hmm. That actually reminded me when I was a kid, I was really little, and I got into a real embarrassing situation where I was at a restaurant, it was a whole party with my family, and I accidentally knocked over a thing containing a bottle of champagne, and it got everywhere, and I was, so embarrassed, I was, crying in the middle of it, and my dad, he was still a young dad, he was trying to figure out, how to calm me down, and then his friend, who happened to have, 3 kids that were older than me, came by, and he, somehow calmed me down immediately. And my dad's like, how did you learn this power? So, experience.
I will say, it kind of reminded me, because I've been listening to the Scrubs Rewatch podcast, and Zach Braff, his mother's, child psychologist. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about, how a lot of times, if he'd be scared or something, rather than, tell him, oh, there's nothing to worry about, it's yeah, that's right that you're feeling that way. If you weren't feeling that way, there'd be something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. So it's very important, to show empathy with a child, not to, talk down to them or tell them necessarily that they're wrong, mm-hmm. but, to meet them on their level.
Yeah, it was a nice example, and mm-hmm. It was, the first lesson the Bad Batch got in daddy lessons, I guess. Because, she essentially has 5 daddies now. They do try to, give her to the family, which, makes sense. Because, who wants to willingly bring a child into a war zone, especially, them who are now on the run and are probably going to face numerous perils. And honestly, this reminded me a lot of, the second or third episode of Mandalorian, where he tries to give Grogu over to, that mother and her child in that one planet, but because of, circumstances and him being hunted, obviously he couldn't leave him there. But in this case, it's not that, he had no choice but to take her back. She chose to be with him of her own volition, which I thought was really nice. And I think it was needed, too, because I know a big criticism of, old cartoons that involve, kid adventurers and explorers was that these kids are usually dragged on these adventures by their parents or guardian figures or whatever, and that they kind of get acclimated because they have to or, out of curiosity. And, the ones that are willing are told not to, but they sneak along anyway, and the ones that, don't have a choice just accept it. But in this case, you see her, actively wanting to be with them despite knowing the dangers they're going to be in.
Just as long as, they teach her to defend herself.
I really hope they do that.
They really need to do that because she just seems way too naive.
Which is understandable considering she, grew up on amino her whole life. I mean, we don't really know how old she is, right? I mean, she's relatively young from how she looks. Well, I mean, obviously she's going to gain experience in the field.
Well, keep in mind, a lot of the clones were artificially aged.
She could be even younger than she actually is.
They might have just, let her... She might be like Boba Fett.
True.
Where, basically, Boba's an unaltered clone.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. She looks like she could probably be 10 at the oldest. Obviously, not much life experience, but again, she'll learn that on the road. Listen, I like the whole dynamic between them, though. It was really sweet. And again, very Mandalorian-esque. Except, in this case, the child can actually talk. Do you want to add anything about the first 2 episodes?
No, I mean, like I said, definitely it's showing what I want to see, and especially with the second episode being thrown right into the planet where they're introducing chain codes into the mix, and you really see, the Empire is not wasting any time in affecting change in the galaxy.
Which makes sense, because given the clones themselves, obviously this was years, probably decades in the making of, what he planned to do once he seized power. So, and, given he now has reach over the entire galaxy, over hundreds of planets, he's got to be fast with this shit. Make sure, wipe out the Jedi, overthrow whatever governments aren't loyal to the Republic, and, seize his hold as soon as possible. I understand that, and I can appreciate that in terms of being an evil dictator, because that's the way you should go about things. You gotta be prepared for that shit. I mean, there's a reason it took 19 friggin' years for, the rebels to make an actual legitimate dent in the Empire. So yeah, like I said, we had waited on reviewing these episodes for several reasons, because A, we weren't sure we wanted to watch this having not finished Clone Wars or Rebels. B, we didn't know if this would lend its format well to a live reaction or even a straight up review, because as some of you may know, we've reviewed Falcon and Winter Soldier, and while we did have fun doing that, we realized kind of partway through that it wasn't the best format for a live reaction, given how long it was, and it was more action oriented than comedy and stuff, which is better for live reactions in regards, what we do with Amphibia and Owl House and all that. And also, we weren't sure if we were gonna like it, because again, we already said our lukewarm responses to the Clone Wars series, and we were kind of afraid that it was gonna be in the same vein. So far, it doesn't seem to be. It seems like it's gonna follow just this group of people in a linear plot, so we're pretty more confident. And we're probably gonna stick to this format, just because it allows us to, look up what we don't catch the first time and, have a better understanding in regards to where we think it's gonna go with the overall plot.
And obviously we will continue watching Clone Wars. Everybody tells us it gets better.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll probably be more endeared to Ahsoka and, the clones as we go along. But yeah, right now, I'm very biased, given that, like I said, I'm more a fan of the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, and this, that the new series just felt like overkill. As far as Bad Batch, this was definitely what I wanted. It doesn't feel like a rehash of anything. It feels like it fits very snug between Clone Wars and the and Rebels. So yeah, I'm very, very excited to see where we go from here with Bad Batch.
I will say the one thing that this series has going for it that Clone Wars doesn't is that I can go into this believing that most of them are going to survive. Because that's another big problem with Clone Wars, is that you can't really attach yourself to anybody, because it's oh, they're obviously going to die, and this person's obviously going to die, and oh, look, they saved this planet. Doesn't matter, it gets destroyed later. It's just it's that sort of thing that puts me off. It's how can I get invested in these characters when I know they're eventually going to turn evil or die?
That's why I couldn't get invested in the lightsaber fight at the end of episode 3. I'm like, oh, this is very nice and everything.
It's like, can we speed up to the part where he gets his legs chopped off?
It's not very nice. It's very clunky and messy. And why do we need this big a thing? And, any case.
But like I said, that it's a big problem with showing prequel movies after the original. It's like, why get attached to certain characters when you know they're not going to make it? I mean, look at Rogue One. It's like, wait, I'm supposed to feel bad that these people are dying when I know automatically that's what's going to happen.
I mean, yeah, it's nice that we know how they got the plans for the Death Star, and that we now know that, why there was that flaw with the Death Star. But aside from that, yeah, there's not much... that endears me to it.
Like, even watching the Solo movie, like, knowing where they all eventually end up, it's like, how can you really get invested, especially in the, like, side characters that don't appear later on, which makes you think, oh yeah, there's probably a good 75% of them dying.
I mean, to be fair, there's stuff about Han and Lando and Chewie that I've always wanted to know.
But there's also, they get involved in the fights and stuff, and it's like, oh, are they going to make it? I wonder if they're going to make it. I mean, they show up way later on, but there's a chance they might not make it. Like I said, it's stuff like that that really puts us off of, the Clone Wars and the prequel stuff, but this one feels different. I feel like this is definitely going to be something that will actually surprise us, keep us on our toes, and obviously they're going to introduce characters, fan service here and there of who will either show up in Rebels or the movies or whatever, but hopefully it'll just be like what we saw before, just cameos. It's like, oh, so that's what that person was doing during this.
Yeah, it'll probably be very much like Rebels.
Yeah. And so I look forward to what the next episode has to offer. So we are going to be doing these one at a time, as per usual with the other series. We just wanted to do the first 2 as a test just to make sure that this would work for us. And I'm proud to say that, yes, it has. So yeah, till next time, where we watch those guys get down with them bad selves. I'm Kat MacBerrie.
I'm Doug MacBerrie.
And as I said before, may the 4th be with you. And watch out for Revenge of the 5th. Because Cinco de Mayo is rough on the colon. Tacos.
Oh, enchiladas.